Do not sign anything. The words crossed the church before Evelyn lowered her eyes to the marriage license, and for one impossible second she thought she had imagined them because nobody moved. Not Daniel beside her, not the minister, not even her mother in the first pew. Then every head turned toward the back of the sanctuary, where Kang Ji-hoon stood alone beneath the open doors in a black suit, rain darkening one shoulder, his face composed in the way Evelyn had once learned to fear more than anger. At 27 weeks pregnant, with 300 guests watching and one hand instinctively covering the curve beneath her ivory gown, Evelyn understood only two things with certainty. Ji-hoon had ignored the clearest boundary she had ever given him, and whatever had brought him here was serious enough that he was willing to let her hate him for it. Daniel's fingers loosened around hers before he seemed to realize he had done it, and that tiny withdrawal disturbed Evelyn because Daniel had built their relationship on steadiness, patience, and the promise that nothing in her old life would ever control her again. "Who is that?" he asked, although he knew enough about the Korean businessman whose household she had managed for 4 years, about the hotels that appeared in newspapers, and the quieter influence people in Chicago rarely discussed. Evelyn kept her eyes on Ji-hoon, someone who was specifically told not to come. When Ji-hoon started down the aisle, Evelyn raised one hand. "Stay there." He stopped immediately, which was new enough to make her heart beat harder because the Ji-hoon she remembered had rarely mistaken another person's boundary for an instruction that applied to him when he believed danger was involved. He removed a sealed envelope from inside his jacket without approaching another step. "I need 5 minutes before you sign." Evelyn felt heat rise beneath her makeup. "You had 5 months, my phone number, and my attorney's number." Something changed in his expression. "I did not have this until 43 minutes ago." Daniel turned toward her with the patient tone he used when a room was emotional and he wanted to be the calmest person inside it. "Evelyn, whatever this is, we do not have to perform it in front of everyone." It sounded reasonable, which was why she nearly accepted it, until Ji-hoon held the envelope toward the minister rather than toward her and said, "The first page concerns your mother's house." Evelyn's body went still because her mother had nearly lost the South Shore 2 flat after medical bills and a brutal refinancing year, and Daniel had helped arrange the modification that reduced the payments. She looked at him. "What does he mean?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I do not know what he thinks he means." Ji-hoon answered without looking at him. "The company that purchased your mother's distress note is represented by Daniel's firm, and the acquisition closed 3 weeks after he proposed to you." A murmur moved through the front pews before Evelyn silenced it with one look. Daniel stepped closer. "My firm represents hundreds of entities. That does not mean I control every transaction." Evelyn asked, "Did you know about this one?" He hesitated for less than a second, but Evelyn had spent years managing wealthy people who could lie without changing their faces, and she knew how expensive half a second could become. "Daniel," his expression softened, "your mother asked me to keep her financial trouble private." Evelyn heard the answer and also heard what was missing. "That is not what I asked." Daniel looked toward Ji-hoon, and his warmth disappeared. "This is what men like him do, Evie. They introduce one frightening fact and let uncertainty do the rest." Ji-hoon's gaze stayed on Evelyn. "Then do not believe me." She frowned. "What?" "Do not believe Daniel either. Stop the ceremony. Send the documents to Rachel Stein and verify every line independently." Daniel gave a short laugh. "You want her to humiliate herself in front of everyone because you brought paperwork?" Ji-hoon's answer came quietly. "I want her to risk embarrassment before she risks a decision she cannot undo while a material question is unanswered." Evelyn looked at the pen beside the marriage license, then at the envelope waiting in the minister's hand, and anger began replacing shock because both men were already trying to define what courage should look like for her. She took the envelope herself but did not open it. "The ceremony is paused," she said, and Daniel stared at her as if the words had changed the architecture of the room. "Evelyn, please." She handed her bouquet to her sister. "If the explanation is innocent, it will still be innocent tomorrow." Then she turned toward Ji-hoon. "And if you used my wedding because your business is tangled up with his, this will be the last decision you ever make on my behalf." Ji-hoon accepted the threat without blinking. "Understood." Evelyn looked at him coldly. "Good. Because you still have not told me why my name is inside a debt file connected to your family." Ji-hoon's face changed just enough to tell her the answer would be worse than the envelope. 20 minutes later, Evelyn sat barefoot in the church's small meeting room while her sister redirected 300 guests to the reception hall and told everyone that nobody was posting a photograph until Evelyn decided what had happened. Daniel sat across from her with his jacket open and both hands on the table, while Ji-hoon remained near the wall until Evelyn pointed at the empty chair and said, "If you are going to ruin my afternoon, stop looming while you do it." He sat without argument, another small change she did not trust enough to admire. Evelyn placed the envelope between them. "Daniel, did you know your client owned my mother's mortgage note?" He looked at the paper. "Yes, but not when we first met." "When did you know?" "After you mentioned the lender at dinner, I learned the note was being sold inside a distressed package." Her mother entered during the answer, still wearing the blue dress she had bought months earlier, and the shame on her face told Evelyn she knew part of the truth. "I asked him not to tell you," she said. "I was behind again, and I did not want you paying another bill for me." Evelyn reached for her hand. "You were allowed to be embarrassed, Mama. He was not allowed to have a business interest in the problem, and let me believe he was only helping." Daniel leaned forward. "My client bought the note, but the modification lowered her payment and kept the house out of foreclosure." Evelyn met his eyes. A good outcome does not answer the disclosure question. His phone vibrated, and the screen lit long enough for Evelyn to read Martin Shaw before Daniel turned it face down. Ji-hoon noticed too, but said nothing. "Who is Martin?" Evelyn asked. Daniel exhaled. "Senior partner at my firm. Why is he calling now?" Daniel hesitated. "Because the debt issue involves a refinancing dispute with Kang Hospitality, and Martin handles strategy." Ji-hoon's voice remained level. He also approved the memorandum containing Evelyn's name. Daniel's face changed before he could control it. Evelyn opened the envelope. The first page showed the ownership chain Ji-hoon had described, but the second was an internal memorandum listing possible pressure points in a 6-week refinancing negotiation. Evelyn's name appeared under Daniel's, identified as his anticipated spouse and daughter of the borrower whose note sat inside the disputed debt pool. Beneath that was a sentence suggesting the relationship might create reputational or relational leverage against the Kang side if negotiations deteriorated. Evelyn read it twice. "Did you see this before today?" Daniel rubbed his jaw. "Yes." "When?" 2 weeks ago." Her mother whispered his name. "Did you agree with it?" Evelyn asked. "No." "Did you tell them no?" "Yes." "Show me." Daniel's silence lasted longer. "The response is on my work email." Evelyn pushed his phone toward him. "Then open it." He did not touch the device. "I cannot disclose privileged client communications in a church because you are angry." The lawyerly precision returned so quickly that Evelyn felt something inside her cool. "Then Rachel will request everything she is entitled to request, and your ethics counsel can decide what remains privileged." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You already called Rachel?" "My sister did 10 minutes ago." Evelyn turned to Ji-hoon. "Why were you investigating his firm deeply enough to find my name?" Ji-hoon answered without decoration. "Mercer's clients have been buying debt tied to 3 properties my family controls, and if they own enough, they can force terms we do not want. So my wedding affects your business too." "Indirectly, yes. And you decided that made you the person who should stop it." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. "I decided the information mattered before you signed." Evelyn shook her head. "That is not the same thing. And if you cannot hear the difference, you learned nothing since I left your house." Daniel looked between them. "This is what I have been telling you. He does not protect people. He manages threats." She turned on Daniel. "Do not use the truth about him to make me forget the truth about you." Evelyn's mother squeezed her hand. Evelyn removed the engagement ring, not because she had decided the relationship was over, but because wearing it while investigating whether her engagement had become a business variable felt dishonest. She placed it beside the envelope. "Rachel meets us Monday morning. My mother gets independent counsel. Daniel's firm stops touching her mortgage until then, and Ji-hoon sends every document through Rachel." Daniel stared at the ring. "What does that mean for us?" Evelyn stood carefully. "It means I am done making permanent decisions while other people ration the truth." Then she looked again at the memorandum and noticed 2 handwritten initials beside the sentence about leverage. Initials she recognized from Daniel's legal pads. DM, he had not merely seen the page. At some point, he had marked it. Monday morning replaced candles with glass walls, legal pads, and a view of the Chicago River that seemed indifferent to what had happened beneath the church roof. Evelyn wore a charcoal maternity suit and sat beside her mother and Rachel Stein, the independent attorney her sister had called before the reception dinner began. Daniel sat across from them with outside ethics counsel rather than anyone from his firm. Ji-hoon was absent because Evelyn had told him not to come, and the fact that he obeyed should not have mattered as much as it did. Rachel began with the mortgage, confirming that the modification was favorable, enforceable, and free of hidden penalties. Evelyn's mother relaxed until Rachel added, "The terms are not the problem. The undisclosed economic relationship is." Daniel no longer argued that point. His firm had earned fees from the client that purchased the note, and although he had not charged Evelyn's mother, he had known whose debt sat inside the package before the modification was completed. "I thought I was helping," he said. Evelyn's mother looked at him with more disappointment than anger. "You were helping, Daniel, but you were also getting paid by somebody on the other side. My firm was paid." She folded her hands. "That distinction may comfort lawyers. It does not comfort me." Evelyn watched Daniel absorb the sentence and saw how much of his confidence had depended on describing complicated actions in the most flattering, accurate language. Rachel moved to the memorandum. The initials beside the leverage sentence were Daniel's, but the electronic record showed he opened the document at 8:14 that morning and answered Martin Shaw at 5:37 that evening. Daniel's email was blunt. "Do not involve Evelyn Price or her mother in any negotiation strategy. Remove both names from future drafts." Evelyn read it twice, wanting relief and resenting that relief now required documentary proof. "You rejected it." "Yes." 9 hours later. Daniel nodded. "Yes." "What happened during those 9 hours?" His ethics counsel shifted, but Daniel answered, "I considered whether the relationship could be disclosed and used without harming you." Her mother drew in a breath. Evelyn felt the baby move beneath her ribs, an ordinary reminder that whatever she decided about Daniel would not remove him from her life. "So you considered it, for several hours." His voice roughened. "Then I realized I was turning the woman I loved into a fact pattern because a partner I respected had called it strategy." Evelyn looked at him. "Why did you never tell me?" He stared at the table. "Because I wanted to be the man you believed I was." Evelyn's expression barely changed. "That sounds romantic if you say it quickly. It gets uglier when you think about it." Nothing in the record showed that Daniel had manipulated the mortgage, proposed for business reasons, or used Evelyn against Ji-hoon, which somehow made the betrayal more human instead of smaller. He had protected the version of himself he wanted her to love, one omission at a time, until those omissions became a structure she was expected to live inside. When Rachel asked whether he would recuse himself from every matter touching the mortgage and report the strategy discussion to his firm's ethics partner, Daniel agreed before his counsel could answer. "That may affect your partnership review," the attorney warned. Daniel looked at Evelyn, then deliberately away from her. "It should." Evelyn felt grief rather than forgiveness. "The engagement is suspended," she said. Daniel's face tightened. "Suspended or over?" "I do not know, and I will not invent certainty to make this easier." After the meeting, Evelyn found Ji-hoon near the elevators with an untouched coffee, and irritation rose before she could stop it. "I told you not to come." "I was downstairs." She glanced at the directory. "Your company has no office here." Ji-hoon paused. "Then I was drinking bad coffee downstairs." "That is not better." As she turned away, Evelyn noticed a man across the lobby, watching them with the stillness of professional security, and she recognized him from Ji-hoon's old household. "You brought Min Jae." Ji-hoon's expression changed. He was assigned nearby. "To me?" When he did not answer immediately, the hallway seemed to narrow. "There were reporters outside your mother's building Sunday night," Ji-hoon said. "I asked him to watch the entrance." Evelyn stared at him. "Without telling me. I did not want to add another problem while you were dealing with Daniel." The sentence was so familiar that she almost laughed. "You interrupted my wedding because another man decided which truth I could handle, and 48 hours later you made the same decision yourself." Ji-hoon went still. Evelyn pointed toward the elevator. "Take your security, take your concern, and do not contact me until I contact you." The doors closed between them before he could answer, and this time respecting her boundary would cost him something he could not buy back with information. By Wednesday, the wedding had become a business story despite Evelyn's attempt to keep it private. A Chicago financial site published a photograph of Ji-hoon standing in the church aisle beneath a headline suggesting that a Kang debt dispute had spilled into the wedding of a former employee, and the article described Evelyn as a personal link between rival negotiating interests. She read that phrase 3 times before anger made it difficult to breathe. It sounded exactly like the language she had spent 4 days fighting. Now strangers were using it. And when the article quoted an unnamed source claiming Ji-hoon had intervened to protect family assets, Evelyn stopped thinking like the careful woman who had demanded evidence from everyone else. She thought like the woman whose wedding had been taken from her in public. She drove to Ji-hoon's hotel without calling, crossed the lobby, and ignored the assistant who tried to tell her he was in a closed family council meeting. The conference room doors opened under her hand before anyone could stop her. Ji-hoon sat at one end of a long table with 5 older relatives and his cousin Min-sok, while a refinancing presentation glowed on the wall behind them. Evelyn held up her phone. "You said you would leave me alone, and now my wedding is being used to make your business problem look like some heroic rescue." Ji-hoon stood. "I did not speak to that publication." His uncle gave a humorless laugh. "This is precisely what we have been discussing." Evelyn turned toward him. "I am not part of your discussion. Apparently you are part of all of them." Ji-hoon's face hardened at his uncle, but Evelyn was too angry to recognize the warning. "Did your company give anyone information about Daniel's debt clients or my mother's mortgage?" she demanded. "No." "Did you tell anyone why you came to the church?" "My attorney, Min-sok, and the people in this room." "Then one of your people talked." Ji-hoon stepped away from the table, but stopped several feet from her. "Evelyn, I understand why you think that, but you asked me not to decide what is true before you verify it." The sentence hit exactly where it should have, and she hated him for being right while she was still furious. His uncle looked between them with open contempt. "You have lost discipline over a woman who no longer works for you, and the entire portfolio is paying for it." Evelyn saw the damage only after she had already helped create it. Ji-hoon's family had been questioning his judgment, and she had walked into their meeting as living evidence that his private decisions could disrupt business. She lowered the phone. "I should not have come in here." Ji-hoon did not rescue her from the admission. No. The answer embarrassed her and steadied her at the same time. "I will leave." As she reached the door, his uncle said, "The council votes tomorrow on whether Ji-hoon retains authority over the refinancing." Evelyn stopped but did not turn around. Ji-hoon's voice followed her. "That vote was coming before you entered this room." She understood what he was doing and disliked needing it. "Do not make me innocent if I made something worse. Then do not make yourself responsible for a structure you did not build." Rachel called before Evelyn reached the parking garage. "Do not contact Ji-hoon again until you hear this," she said, and the urgency in her voice made Evelyn stop beside the elevator. Daniel had submitted internal material to his firm's ethics partner that morning, including a message from Martin Shaw to an outside communications consultant sent less than an hour after the ceremony stopped. The message did not name Evelyn's mother, but it instructed the consultant to emphasize that Kang leadership had disrupted a private wedding because of a debt dispute, language close enough to the article that Rachel believed the firm would need to investigate the source. Evelyn closed her eyes. So Ji-hoon probably did not leak it. "I cannot prove who spoke to the reporter yet," Rachel said. But Shaw's office was actively shaping the same narrative. Evelyn waited until she was inside her car before calling Ji-hoon, then remembered she had ordered him not to contact her and nearly laughed at the absurdity of being the one who kept breaking the distance she demanded. He answered on the second ring. "Rachel found a message from Shaw about pushing the wedding story," she said. Silence followed. "I accused you without verifying." "Yes. I walked into your council meeting and made your position worse." "Probably." The lack of comfort stung, which told her she deserved the sting. "I am sorry." Ji-hoon exhaled slowly. "I accept the apology, but you do not get to enter my work and treat suspicion as proof, because I have given you reasons to distrust me." Evelyn looked through the windshield at the gray garage wall. "You are right." Then Rachel called again before either could say more. The current holder of her mother's mortgage had received a new purchase offer from an investment entity controlled by Martin Shaw, submitted less than 4 hours after the article appeared. Evelyn felt the week rearrange itself around a new possibility. Shaw was no longer merely defending Daniel's firm from embarrassment. Someone was still trying to make her mother's house useful. Rachel's first job was to separate fear from fact. Even if Shaw's entity purchased the mortgage note, Evelyn's mother's modification would remain enforceable, and nobody could simply arrive with a new payment schedule because ownership changed hands. The real danger was that a creditor with strategic motives could turn routine servicing, future refinancing, or every technical disagreement into pressure. That distinction calmed Evelyn's mother. Rachel demanded conflict disclosures from the current note holder and notified Daniel's ethics counsel that Shaw appeared to be pursuing an asset connected to a person already named in disputed strategy documents. Evelyn listened without interrupting, then asked the question she had learned to ask before every conclusion. "What can we prove today?" Rachel answered. "That Shaw made the offer. That he knew who your mother was. Motive still requires evidence." Daniel supplied part of it before noon. He requested a meeting through Rachel and arrived without anyone from his firm, looking exhausted enough that Evelyn remembered the man who had sat beside her through prenatal appointments and knew which foods made her sick. Loving those memories did not make the omissions smaller, and hating the omissions did not make every memory false. Daniel placed no file in front of her. "Martin has talked for years about distressed debt as relationship leverage," he said. "Not illegally, not in writing most of the time, but often enough that everyone around him knew what he meant." Evelyn's anger sharpened. "And you stayed?" Daniel nodded. "The money was excellent, the work was prestigious, and I was good at telling myself his choices belonged to him." Rachel asked whether he would put that under oath and identify the conversations he heard. Daniel looked at Evelyn first, caught himself, and shifted his attention to Rachel. "Yes." His voice was quieter when he added that he had already requested leave from the firm and reported his own delayed disclosure, knowing either decision could end his partnership track. Evelyn felt no satisfaction, only the ache of watching someone finally become honest after honesty could no longer save what he wanted. When Rachel left them alone, Daniel asked, "If Ji-hoon had never walked into that church, would you have married me?" Evelyn could have protected him with uncertainty, but she was finished rationing truth. "Yes." Daniel closed his eyes. "That is the part I cannot forgive myself for," he said. Evelyn's throat tightened. "Do not turn remorse into another way of controlling the ending." He looked at her. "What ending do you want?" She rested a hand over the baby moving beneath her blouse. "I want our daughter to have a father who tells the truth when the truth makes him look bad. And I want to stop wondering whether my husband is editing reality before it reaches me." Daniel understood before she removed the ring from her purse. "The engagement is over," she said. "That does not erase your place as her father if you show up for it." Pain crossed his face, but he did not bargain. "I will." For the first time, Evelyn believed a promise from him without needing it to become a promise about her. That evening, Ji-hoon's family council voted 6-5 to remove him from operational control of the refinancing portfolio. Min-seok took authority, while Ji-hoon retained ownership and an advisory role he had not yet decided whether to accept. Evelyn learned the result from Rachel, not from Ji-hoon, along with something else he had chosen not to announce. Before the vote, he signed a binding consent, allowing her mother's note to be separated from the debt pool if the current holder approved the restructuring. The consent weakened one piece of the Kang negotiating position, and his uncle had cited it as evidence that Ji-hoon's judgment had become personal. Evelyn stared at the document. What did he get for signing this? Rachel shook her head. "Nothing I can find," Evelyn called him. "You lost the vote." "News travels quickly. You also signed away your objection to separating my mother's note." "Yes. Why did you not tell me?" There was a pause long enough to prove he was choosing his answer. "Because I wanted to know whether I could give up an advantage without turning the sacrifice into a debt you owed me." Evelyn sat quietly with that. "And your uncle thinks you did it because of me." "My uncle thinks compassion is what people call bad arithmetic." "Was it because of me?" Ji-hoon answered carefully. "You made the cost visible to me. The decision was mine." The next morning, the note holder suspended consideration of Shaw's offer, pending its own compliance review, and Daniel's sworn statement triggered a broader ethics investigation into Shaw's conflict practices. Nothing exploded, nobody was led away in handcuffs, and Evelyn was grateful because real consequences did not need theater to be real. The mortgage remained protected, the proposed sale was frozen, and Daniel's career now depended on investigators who owed him no kindness. Ji-hoon had lost authority he once considered inseparable from identity. Evelyn had lost the marriage she had expected to begin that week. Yet, as she stood in her mother's kitchen, listening to an old toaster click itself into another morning, she realized the strangest loss was certainty, And for the first time, she no longer wanted someone else to replace it for her. 7 months later, the most important changes in Evelyn's life looked ordinary. Her daughter Nora was 4 months old and slept badly unless somebody walked slow circles through the living room. Her mother's mortgage had been transferred to an independent servicer with no relationship to Shaw, Daniel's former firm, or the Kang businesses. The ethics investigation ended without spectacular punishment. Investigators found that Daniel had rejected the strategy involving Evelyn, but failed to disclose the conflict quickly enough, and he left the firm. Martin Shaw resigned after the review documented similar attempts to turn clients' personal vulnerabilities into negotiation pressure. Daniel joined a smaller practice and entered mediation with Evelyn before Nora was born. He never used a parenting conversation to reopen the engagement. One Sunday, when he arrived to pick Nora up, Evelyn watched him struggle with the carrier straps until he admitted he had forgotten which buckle released first. "The gray one," she said. Daniel found it and smiled with embarrassed relief. "I used to think if I looked competent long enough, eventually I would become honest by accident." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Do not make that into a speech." "I was not going to." They both laughed, and the sound did not repair the past, which was exactly why it felt safe. Ji-hoon's changes were slower and less elegant. He accepted Min-suk's offer to remain as an advisor, then discovered that influence without final authority required sitting through decisions he disliked, without treating disagreement as betrayal. Twice he nearly quit, and twice Evelyn asked whether he wanted to leave because the work no longer mattered, or because losing an argument made him feel powerless. They began with coffee once a week, then dinner in places where Ji-hoon could not quietly clear half the room, then occasional evenings at Evelyn's condo after Nora was born. The first time he held the baby, he asked permission, and the awkwardness of the question moved Evelyn more than any expensive gesture could have. Evelyn changed too, although she preferred discussing everyone else's progress. She apologized again for entering the council meeting and accusing Ji-hoon before she had proof, because distrust did not give her permission to become careless with facts. "I was angry, and I wanted the first explanation that matched what I already believed about you," she admitted one evening. Ji-hoon looked at her over a badly cooked pot of rice. "You had considerable supporting evidence. That is not an excuse. No." He tasted the rice and grimaced. "Neither is this." Evelyn laughed so hard she had to sit down, and for a moment, the man who once frightened rooms full of people looked personally defeated by water ratios. The conversation that mattered happened without a crisis. Nora slept in a carrier near the kitchen doorway. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and Ji-hoon had just thrown away the second ruined batch of rice when he became unusually quiet. "I want to ask you something, and I am trying not to make the question sound like a plan I already made for both of us." Evelyn folded her arms. "That introduction is not encouraging," he smiled. "I want a life that includes you, but I do not want stopping your wedding to become a story where I think I earned the ending." For an instant, Evelyn remembered the white roses, Daniel's hand releasing hers, and Ji-hoon standing beneath the church doors with information she needed, and an arrogance she did not. She had believed safety meant finding the man who frightened her least, then learned that gentleness without honesty could still take choices away. She had believed Ji-hoon's control made every feeling beneath it untrustworthy, then watched him give up leverage when nobody promised to reward him. Neither lesson required her to choose one man because the other failed. What mattered was that she had stopped confusing love with permission to manage reality. "So do not ask for an ending," she said. "Ask for the next thing." Ji-hoon considered that. "Will you keep seeing me?" Evelyn smiled. "Yes." "May I kiss you?" The question surprised her enough that she laughed, then stepped closer and put one hand against his chest. "Yes." He waited until she closed the distance first, and the kiss was quiet, almost cautious. Nothing like the grand interruption that had brought him back into her life. When they separated, Nora made a small sound from the carrier, and Ji-hoon looked toward her before looking back at Evelyn. "Should I pick her up?" Evelyn nodded. "You can." Months earlier, Evelyn had walked away from an altar because two men possessed pieces of information about her life, and both believed they understood what should happen next. Now Daniel was learning to be a father without demanding restoration. Ji-hoon was learning to care without turning care into authority, and Evelyn was learning that uncertainty was not a failure. She needed someone powerful to solve. She reached for Ji-hoon only after he left the space open for her to choose, and when he reached back, Nothing about the moment felt owed. That was why it finally felt like love.